All right, and we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that. I did not realize, number one, the microphone wasn't on, but we're going to get back to conversation here. Is what William was saying earlier was...
the fact that they want to take responsible gun owners, such as yourself and myself, and all the Americans out there, who just want to hunt or whatever, or just have a weapon to protect their family in case somebody breaks in, because that is a reality. That's a lot of what's going on today. Is people breaking in homes is on the rise. People breaking into businesses is on the rise, and they're blaming it on all these deaths on responsible Americans, when a lot of it has to do with your gangbangers, in like Detroit and stuff like that.
And the fact is that what they're not telling people is a good majority of the police, or excuse me, a good majority of the statistics that they're releasing are the fact is that most of the people who are being shot by the police. So they're saying, oh yeah, look at all this gun violence. Meanwhile, it's whether they were armed or not, it's the police officers hurting an unarmed civilian or an armed civilian, whether they had a knife or whatever the case is. They're using their own numbers and their own casualties to limit our ability to own firearms. And the whole thing is people are saying, oh, well, there's all these crazy gun nuts yelling and hollering right now about the SAFE Act and everything else here in New York and blah, 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 blah. You know what? The reason is because people, when they hear New York, they think, thick city. They think a lot, dense population. They think of New York City. And in reality, New York City is a very small part of New York in the first place. And that's what a lot of people don't realize who've never been here before, is that there's a lot. And I mean a lot of farmland and a lot of open area where it's just all woods and everything else, where people do hunting and everything else. And yes, you can hunt with a semi-automatic rifle like an AR-15 or an AK-47. They're actually very good rifles for hunting, because you may not be using it for deer hunting, but I know a lot of people who use, for instance, an AK-47 for hunting feral hogs. Now, I don't know if there's a problem with that in Illinois, but I know down south a little further, they're having a major problem with large feral hogs that are just destroying property. They actually hurt people. People have been killed by these things. They're nasty creatures, and they're breeding like rats, and they're becoming a major nuisance. And then there's all these anti-gunners, and there's all these pro-animal rights activists who are yelling and screaming about these animals, when they don't realize that if we don't quell their population, that's going to become a major problem real soon. And that's another thing that I don't understand why people haven't brought more attention to. We need to deal with the feral hog population in the South, because it's wreaking major havoc on the crops and on everything else down there. And in a couple of decades, it's going to end up being a major problem. And I don't know why that hasn't gotten, the only attention it's gotten is that, oh, well, these cruel people are killing pigs. Really? Killing pigs? The whole problem here is that, like I said before, our media is picking and choosing the stupidest things to blow out of proportion, so to speak, and making it so that it's a major problem here, or making stupid things here a major problem in America to keep us all arguing so that they can further their agendas behind the scenes. That's basically what I was trying to get across before during my Stammer Fest.
It's going to be, look at my right hand while my left hand's doing something else. Basically what it boils down to is they want to make it our fault. If anything ever happens, anything ever goes down, they want it to be our fault. They don't want to look like the bad guy.
Oh,
they want to actually be the savior.
Well, look at Katrina. What most people don't even realize is that they herded people into the local stadium, and there were people dying of dehydration and dysentery and everything else due to unsafe, unhealthy conditions because of all these people crammed in such a small space. And meanwhile, geez, we lost them again. I have a crappy phone here. My point is what I was saying was that there was a lot of people who lost their lives during Katrina because of the fact that the military was like, oh yeah, come here to this particular area, and when when you come here, we're going to give you food, water, and blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, they didn't have enough supplies for everybody, but they had people, they were worried about people leaving the stadium and coming, they were worried about people leaving the stadium and going and looting things and doing everything else. So what did? They herded everybody in there and let them die while our own soldiers were sitting outside eating MREs and drinking, water and keeping themselves hydrated because they were worried about the population doing stupid things. Meanwhile, all these wealthy Americans were out in the streets committing stupid gun crimes with their freaking home-owned firearms because they were scared about whether it was a minority or not hurting people and taking their stuff. So they were going it was a very small portion of the population doing that. So they started going around confiscating everybody's firearms because these idiots were doing stupid things. I mean, I don't know if you recall that video where the police officers tackled that 90-year-old woman because she had an unloaded revolver.
No, I don't think I've seen that one.
No, look it up on the internet. If any of you are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, go on YouTube and look up Katrina videos. It's one of the most when it comes to Hurricane Katrina, when it hit Louisiana and all that. There was a video of a 90-year-old woman talking about, like, there was the news doing a documentary, and they were talking about a woman who was she was in the dry zone. That's, I guess, what they were calling it. And she didn't really have to deal with flooding, but they were showing how much food she had and that she didn't have to be evacuated, although they were force evacuating people who were perfectly safe. But while the police were there conducting a search for whatever reason, she was just to display that she had the capability to defend herself. She had a pistol with the butt pointed towards the police officer in her palm of her hand, not even in a ready firing position, to say, "Hey, I have protection." And the police officer goes, "Gun!" And this large gentleman about my size decides to tackle this 90-year-old frail woman into the corner, and she ended up with a black eye, some bruises. I mean, she was 90 years old, so I'm sure a gust of wind would have caused her some bruising. But my point is that these men, they get all these people who are gung-ho, ready to go, and they train them to, as soon as they see a gun, to just react. When in reality, that's the problem with Ferguson. It's the problem with all these police shootings that's going on in the first place, is that I don't know what they're exactly training gentlemen nowadays, but I know that my family, who are mostly retired police officers, did not act that way. And I talk to them all the time, and they say how they're appalled at the way a lot of police officers are conducting themselves nowadays, because the simple fact is it's asinine the way a lot of them conduct themselves. They don't have any respect, but they command that everybody respects them. And the last I checked, is you got to give respect to get respect. And I've told that to many police officers. I've had them, because I'll get an attitude with a police officer, mostly on my own property, where I know I can't be arrested for disorderly conduct. But I've had police officers come to my home for silly reasons, like we've had horses escape, and my next door neighbors, who are the ones who are related to the one who shot that young man, they decided to call the police instead of just calling over and saying, "Hey, your horse got out, so we wanted to let you know." And then we have police officers come up who are, I'm sure, frankly, annoyed that they have to respond to a call like that. And they come up and they start giving me an attitude. Like, I actually had one getting in my face telling me he was going to arrest me for child endangerment because the horse ran close to my neighbor's children. And I was like, that's not child endangerment. But the point is that they come up here acting like tough guys, and then they expect everybody to be like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" So, but the whole thing is they seem to think that, I was always taught you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. And I guess these gentlemen seem to think that it's just turning into a fascist police officer, or fascist. I don't want to say police state, but the police forces are starting to think that fascism is going to get the job done, or they can just make everybody feel that if they don't comply, that they're going to get hurt in one form or another. And last I checked, that's borderline tyranny.
You have to do what you're told, and you'll live a happy life. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. If you believe other than that, like if you're a patriot and you believe that we should keep the Constitution, we should, have our rights, then you're labeled as a terrorist, and it's ridiculous.
Well, and that's the whole thing. I mean, I don't understand where they get off labeling American citizens terrorists and enemy combatants. For instance, I have multiple buddies who are in the military, but I have a buddy who, like I said, I've said it before on other shows, he's fairly young, and he's still in that like that phase we were talking about earlier, is that whole gung-ho phase where he's just ready to fight. And he's a good guy, but I could see him. I've known him for a couple of years now. I can see him on his own. I have not said anything to him because those guys are very hard-headed and very hard to get through to in the first place when they're indoctrinated with the crap that they are from their superiors. But the simple fact is that when it comes down to sorry about that, my family is in the background. The whole problem with the everybody made me lose my train of thought again. The whole problem with it, one thing I noticed about him is that he's slowly waking up, and he's slowly but surely realizing that the military and his superiors don't have his best interests in their favor. And sadly, right now, the only place he can make money with all the training he has is in the military. But where I was going with all this was that me and him were talking one day, and he was just really upset because he was getting close to having to renew his contract. And I have a feeling he felt almost intimidated back into signing back up because number one, he knew that if he went back into the general population, it'd be hard for him to find a job in the first place. But the other thing is that they told him that if he leaves with the training he has, because he's trained on all the crew service weapons, and he's trained on, he's technically an instructor, he is a trained rifle firearms instructor. I believe he has his pistol firearms instructor training certificate or whatever it is too. But my point is that they told him that if he left now, that he would be considered, because of his age and his training, that he would be considered an enemy combatant of the state, and that he would be watched, because and that's the whole thing that a lot of people don't understand is that, and you know this, soldiers, especially in the Army, like yourself, you were in the Army, right?
That's correct.
The soldiers, especially in the Army, are trained to take down infrastructure and help rebuild it. But they're mainly trained to cause chaos, mayhem, take down bridges and buildings, and make it harder for the enemy combatants to fight and move supplies. And then when the government lets them go and says, well, we have no use for you anymore, then they're afraid of you. And that's what people aren't understanding, is that, yes, they have this training, but these men were trained to defend this country. But the thing is that unless you're doing something that you know that these gentlemen are going to end up laying down their arms, or at least switching sides against our government or whoever this entity is that's causing these problems, that's why they're afraid, because they're doing something wrong. Because the only time I would be nervous that somebody is armed is if they're mentally disturbed, or I'm going to do something to them that I don't want them to stop me with a firearm with. So it boils down to they're limiting people's ability to own firearms because they know that the returning troops they don't want returning troops to have access to military technology, I guess you could say, and be able to fight back if they want to decide to do something stupid like lock down the country.
Well, they don't want us to train the American people, train their brains into realizing what's really going on behind the scenes. They consider prior military an actual threat because of what we know and the training that we have. They know that we could build a small army in each of our states or our counties in a drop of a hat, and actually end up having very well-trained patriots, to where if something happened here in the United States, we could take care of ourselves and we'd be very well treated. And they don't want that. They want us to depend on them. They don't want us to depend on each other. They want us to be a country of sheeple who, if the government says, hey, come down to this place and, we'll take care of you. We'll give you shots. We'll give you food. We'll give you shelter. We'll take care of you. Don't take care of yourself. Like, that goes along with the whole prepping thing.
Hence the FEMA camps.
3 days worth of food, they consider that a terrorist act. And that's stupid. Especially like look at what happened with Katrina or 9/11 or anything like that. Where, having water and food and different supplies more than 3-day value is basically the smartest thing you could ever do. Because you never know what could happen. I mean, I live right near the New Madrid seismic zone. So if that were to pop, I wouldn't have any help from the government for at least 2 to 3 weeks. So I would need more than 3 days worth of water, more than 3 days worth of food and medical supplies. So I can't depend on the government 110%. Just for the fact that I have a family and I have to, support my family and keep my family alive. And the only way to do that is to prepare for anything and everything that could happen.
See, that's the whole thing. Is like they're trying to, I guess you could say, profile people who are, for instance, people like you who lead militias and everything else. But in reality, what they need to do is start keeping an eye on the people in themselves. They're infiltrated by these sociopaths who just want to further their own agendas by lining their own pockets with, with the money of the hard-working taxpayers, basically. And then when anybody, or for instance, like the military-industrial complex is really getting out of hand in this country, and a lot of people don't even understand what the military-industrial complex is in the first place. And that really basically boils down to our country changed vastly after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Once John F. Kennedy was taken out, every other president knew that if they didn't play ball to some degree, that they would get the same treatment. So these men think that they're going to change the world, and then they get into office and realize, whoa, wait, what's going on here? And then they're sat down by some whatever people it is, and they say, listen, this is how it's going to go. This is the way it's going to work. If you don't play ball, then you're going to get the old head popping treatment like your buddy JFK there did. And they're like, all right, whatever. So they just kind of let whatever's going on in the background happen. So meanwhile, now they're starting to get emboldened because they know that our information is traveling faster. It's getting around easier. The people are able to get their opinions out and able to get news out way better, and people are able to get I would say most sides of the story out as much as they possibly can. And then they're able to make a decision for themselves, which they don't want, which is hence why they're doing the things they do with the mainstream media and the news outlets on the TV and the regular radio. The whole point is that they want to keep you glued to these facets so that when things go down, they can tell you what to do and give you the propaganda and the rhetoric that they want you to. Meanwhile, people like us are telling the truth, and we're the enemy.
Exactly. If you tell the truth, if you go against their agenda, if you go against anything that they say, as far as helping the American people, quote unquote, you're a terrorist. It doesn't matter, if you're right or wrong, you're a terrorist. So, it's come down to the point where if our founding fathers were still alive, they would have done something by now. But there are so many people who are afraid of just the word militia or patriot group that they're not willing to join up because of the fact that they're afraid of the repercussions of belonging to any group that would actually help them stay alive. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that American people are like, this is not going to happen to us. Our government's not going to turn against us. Why would they do that? This isn't Nazi Germany. We don't have Hitler as a president. Well, that's what they don't want to believe that sort of thing is going to everything else, living their life, other than realizing what is really going on. And they're scared. They don't want to believe something is going to happen. So they are going to do everything in their power to keep their mind clear of that. And they're going to keep telling themselves that this is never going to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And anybody who says differently is crazy.
Well, I think I told you this story. I was at work one day, and this gentleman who's and the whole thing is that, and I think it comes from the government from government. This mentality is within government officials as well. But this large gentleman, he's like good 300 pounds, if not more, very large, very, very big guy. And I'm, like I said, I'm 6'2", 212 pounds, and this guy made me feel a little intimidated. Well, my point is I was talking about my rifles and my guns and everything else, and the guy said, "Why do you need all that stuff?" And I said, "It's a hobby of mine, but it's also just to be a smart ass because I because I could tell he was an anti-gunner. I decided to give him the cliche, well, it's my Second Amendment right." And the guy flipped out, started screaming, "No, no, 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 no," like a freaking toddler. And I was so surprised because I'm 26 years old. This guy is like, I believe in his mid-40s. And the guy was having a tantrum like a freaking toddler. And he's screaming at me, "What are you talking about?" Just yelling all this anti-gun rhetoric that he was indoctrinated with. And I could tell exactly where he got it from, which was the news. And I couldn't remember exactly what news facet it was, but I remember, especially during the Sandy Hook shootings and everything else, this guy was probably just one of those people who was glued to the TV and just listened to every single anti-gun thing they ever said about what happened in Sandy Hook and everything else, and he just repeated it. He just parroted it in my face, and I just started laughing at him. And then some guy jumped between us because we were starting to get in each other's faces. And well, actually, I should say he was getting in my face because I was just standing exactly where I was. And this guy jumped between us and was like, "Well, you guys know that you shouldn't talk about politics at work. It's just something that's going to cause an argument." And I was like, me and somebody else were having a conversation about firearms. And this guy decided to just start screaming in my face about his opinion. And it just made me realize that, like the old saying goes, God made man, Samuel Colt made man equal. And the whole thing is that gentlemen like him, who don't have to worry about not being physically intimidating and who are used to having people back down to him. Number one, I don't back down to anybody. I don't care how big you are. You can kick my ass all you want. At least I stood my ground. But my point is that when it came down to it, people like him are just like the politicians. They feel safe and secure. They're surrounded by a bunch of armed guards. They're surrounded by a bunch of guys like you and me who train hard and do what we have to do to know what we know. And you more so than myself. But the point is that they feel safe and secure with their security blanket. But then they think to themselves, "Oh, well, the stuff I'm doing might piss these people off, and they might come and want retribution one day." And that's basically why they're trying to make all these firearms illegal now. I mean, yes, for instance, I saw a video of a man recently who was talking about a young police officer. He recently was talking about a young child who was killed in a drive-by shooting, who was just a random bystander. But the point is, he's like, "Oh, well, they have access." The problem is they have access to high quality firearms, with high capacity, high quality firearms is how he put it. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? It didn't take a high capacity magazine to kill that child. That child was killed with one bullet to the head, and that was it. And yes, that's a very tragic thing because I guess the father was sitting on the porch with the child in his lap, and the child was struck in the head by a bullet. That's extremely tragic. But you know what? My point is that she wasn't shot 30 times; she was shot once. So it doesn't matter what kind of gun that bullet came out of. And everybody's trying to blame responsible gun owners, but in reality, it's mostly it's mostly inner city crimes being committed with handguns. It's not even rifles that the crimes are being perpetrated with.
Well, the kid that did Sandy Hook, he killed his first victim with a .22.
It was his mother, of all.
Yeah, with a 22. So that wasn't an AR-15. That wasn't an AK-47. It wasn't a fully automatic rifle. It was a 22, something you use to go varmint hunting with.
I have a 22, like less than 10 feet away from me right now.
Yeah, so I mean, they're just looking for reasons to ban an assault weapon. And the reason they're doing that is because if we are armed exactly how they are armed, whether we have semi-automatic and they have fully automatic, it doesn't matter. The fact that we have the same exact gun as them, we're a threat. We shouldn't have the same gun as them. We shouldn't have the same weaponry or the same.
Well, absolutely, and that I didn't get my chance to say my piece to the gentleman because he was too busy screaming in my face. But anybody who's willing to sit down and have an intellectual conversation with me, it doesn't matter whether they're anti-gun or not, I'll sit down and have a conversation with them. But if they want to resort to ad hominem, which is personal attacks and calling someone an idiot or a jackass or whatever the case is, then I'm not going to listen to you. I'm just going to really, all right, get the hell away from me before I knock you out. But my point is that any anti-gunner tries to tell me, oh, well, there's no reason for you to be able to have a 30-round magazine or extended clips, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you know what? The reason why, or they try to say, oh, well, you know, you should only be, they try to limit to hunting rifles, like bolt actions and stuff like that. Number one, bolt actions were fighting rifles for a long period of time. So people can go to war with a bolt action rifle. There's still bolt action rifles being deployed on the battlefield today. So limiting semi-automatic, limiting. Exactly. You yourself own a bolt action rifle that probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it was used in World War II, whether it took a life or not. But the point is that those rifles were built to withstand a long period of time because they didn't know when World War II was going to end. But anyway, but back to what I was saying and what we were getting at is that the Second Amendment was created so that we can have the same exact arms as the military, so that they don't have a tactical advantage over us. Yes, we're not allowed to own tanks, we're not allowed to own grenades, but you know what? It doesn't really matter in the long run. The point is that if they can't intimidate us, they don't like that. And that's basically the point of view that we're trying to get out to the people here, is that if you have a clean record, if you're a responsible American, then it's not only your right, but your responsibility to go out, purchase a firearm, and practice with it as much as possible. Not only, and the funniest thing about it is my best friend was I would say, I guess you could say he was a hardcore anti-gunner. And then I was like, have you ever even fired? Like, he was like, oh, I'll never fire a firearm because he lives down in the city where I grew up. And then I told him to come up here. I was like, oh, man, we'll shoot some guns, blah, blah, blah. He was coming up to stay for a week. And he was like, I don't like guns. I'm never going to shoot a gun. I'm not touching firearms. Guns are bad. They're scary. Da, 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 da. And then I took him out, handed him a 22, set up a bunch of cans up on the fence line out in the field, and just told him, just try to take the cans off the field. As soon as he got his first hit and started taking the cans off of the fence, he was obsessed with it. And then next week when he went home, I was talking to him on the phone. He's like, oh, I'm getting a gun. I want to buy a 22, blah, 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 blah. It's just fun to target practice. You know, there's a lot of innocent a lot of people especially most of the people who've never owned or fired a firearm, just see firearms as this evil thing, and they don't realize how fun it is. And the fact is that not every single firearm is made for combat, and not every single firearm is made for maiming people and doing everything else. That, you know, I target practice as much as possible with my 22. Now, I personally know that I'm a talented shooter in the first place. Like, I've had a firearm in my hands ever since I was a very young child, whether it was from a BB gun, blowgun, whatever it is. I've always been obsessed with target shooting. And then when I moved up here and was able to hunt small game freely, I started being able to just peg rabbits at 50 yards without having to even think about it. And I didn't even realize how talented I was until I started hanging out with the locals around here who've been hunting their whole life, shooting real firearms. They laugh at people who use BB guns because they just don't see the point in them. And I started they started realizing that I'm just not the average, or I wasn't when I first moved up here, the average city kid, because I was pulling off shots that took them years and years to develop. And then that's when I was like, you know what, I'm going to become a firearms instructor, because I started realizing all these firearms instructing videos that I watch are second nature to myself. For some reason, because I've just, like, you know, in a way, you can say that shooters can teach you certain tactics if you have the mindset for it. Like, or not shooters, excuse me, shooting video games. But they're not going to teach you muscle memory, and they're not going to teach you, proper gun handling and everything else, and proper technique. But
no, the only thing they're going to teach you is eye-hand coordination and strategy. Other than that, it's it.
But I think that's really where a lot of my talent came from, in the sense that I learned from a young age, because my point is that although I've learned all this stuff, I've never felt the need to go on a shooting spree. I was bullied extremely a lot in high school and in middle school. Because I had moved from one school to another, and being the new kid, you know, you obviously become become the butt of everyone's jokes, and you become the target of the bullies in school and stuff. So I ended up getting into a little bit of trouble because I was usually protecting myself from bullies. Like, I punched one kid in the nose because he pushed me up against the locker, and I was raised old school, and that's if you're bothered by a bully, you punch him in the nose as hard as you can once, and most of the time they'll leave you alone after that. So that's where that came from, and it always worked for me. But then, as I got a little older and got into high school, the punishments became a little more severe. But my point is that I was always taught that you defend yourself. If you get pushed, you push back harder. And nowadays, they're trying to teach our population to be a bunch of pansies, pretty much. And what I was saying about the firearms thing is that everybody I've ever met who doesn't like firearms has usually never fired one.
Yeah.
They usually the only time they see a firearm is it's being used in a movie to kill someone. And yes, that we all have to accept the grim reality that self-defense with a firearm means that you're using lethal force. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? This may not be in medieval times, but it sure as hell is not the most peaceful time in the world, as like people like to lead you to believe. And I have a really good feeling that there's going to be something that pisses people off and starts people fighting, whether it's within this country or abroad. Again, and everybody can feel it, because the amount of people who are preppers in this world are a lot. Their numbers are growing rapidly. Their numbers are growing exponentially, to the point where almost everybody I know is a prepper to some degree or another. Like, a lot of people are embarrassed to admit it, and I talk about it openly. And the reason is because I'm trying, just like this show, I'm trying to get prepping and talking about what's going on in the world around us to be commonplace again. I'm trying, you know what I mean? Like, people used to have, back in the 1950s and in the 40s and stuff like that, during, when in World War II and stuff like that, people were, what do you call it? Or, excuse me, not World War II, or whatever the case is. The point is that people, during the Cold War, is what I was trying to think of, is people started getting bomb shelters prepared. People started, stocking up food and water and everything else. Those people weren't crazy. But we never really came out of the Cold War in the first place, and now the Cold War is starting to ramp back up. And I think that's where this is all coming from, is that our United States government saw all this crap starting to heat back up again. They knew that Russia is starting to go into its death throes of a crappy economy, because their economy is like being held up by popsicle sticks and gum, and and they're just trying to do stuff to kind of seem like they're still strong in the world, because they know that pretty soon they're probably not going to have any political power whatsoever. But neither does America. So we're doing the same thing. Meanwhile, we've essentially got the two bullies on the block pointing firearms at each other, and they're both just exhausted, and they only have one bullet left in the chamber, and that's to do something stupid. I mean, now I've been hearing rumors and seeing all these, I don't know whether the reports are false or not, of people who are of our government getting ready to nuke China in a couple of years. if things go the way they're planning on them going. And meanwhile, I think the whole point of, like, I think it's like what you're saying is that people don't want to admit it. But I think it's also the fact that this seems, especially because of the things like that they show in Hollywood and everything else, which we could all argue is another propaganda machine. But all the stuff that people see on the news seems like what they've seen in the movies. So it seems so grandiose that that they don't think it's going to happen.
Exactly. Plus, they're scared that if it does happen, what's going to happen to them?
Oh, exactly. A lot of people don't want to admit that they can't protect their children and that they can't keep their kids safe. And that's the fact of the matter is that's life. If a nuclear bomb drops right on your head, it doesn't matter if you're in a bomb shelter or not. You're most likely going to die. So, you know what? C'est la vie. That's life. But the point is that you can't just huddle in fear in your home. But my point is that, like, a lot of people like think that preppers are crazy. No, we're not crazy. We're not people hiding under a tinfoil hat, under a blanket, and under our mattress in our home waiting for the bomb to drop. We live a very free and happy life because we know that if the worst happens, we've got a better chance than everybody else.
Right.
So
I've been a prepper for a long time, and I still live my life day to day. I don't huddle in the basement and wait for the crap to hit the fan or anything like that. I live my life. I have a family. I have a wife. We go to the movies. We go out to dinner. I mean, I live my life, but I'm prep at the same time. So I'm not telling people to stop living your life and just prep all the time and, forget about everything.
Still there, William? Seems like William just dropped out. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. He must have got some bad reception there because all of a sudden he stopped. Like, we literally couldn't hear anything.
Oh, okay. Where did I leave off at?
I don't recall exactly. I started fiddling with the phone and lost my place of thought
Okay.
there.
Well, basically what I'm trying to say is, if you're a prepper, you don't have to stop living your life. Like, I live my life, the way I want to.
It's partially a lifestyle, is what I tell everybody. It's partially a lifestyle being a prepper. It's also has a lot to do with your mentality. A lot of people don't realize, like we were talking about, like, a lot of people who are preppers are afraid to talk about it. Meanwhile, it's like hiding being a cigarette smoker when everybody in the room is a smoker. Everybody's like, oh, big deal. You know what I mean? Like, most people are afraid that they're going to be labeled a kook, that you're paranoid. No, I just know I don't live in la la land like you do, and think that the government's going to come swoop in and save me like in the movies. Yes, there's a lot of gentlemen who would be gladly willing to risk their life to save you, but you know what? There's very few and far between when it comes to the fact that if there was a widespread disaster of some sort, our government is nowhere near prepared for it. And neither are the police officers that are in the local area. Like a lot of times I've heard this said by a lot of people, is that police officers are nothing more than a cleanup crew. And in a way, I mean, unless they are, which is true, I mean, unless you have a police officer sitting in your home on the couch with you when somebody breaks into your home and they have intention to hurt you and your family, they're not gonna be able to do anything about it besides show up and find out what that person looked like and try to find them and bring them to justice. But they can't protect us. Nor is it their job, technically. The Supreme Court just recently ruled, I don't know how long ago, that it's not the police's job to protect the population. It's their job to enforce the law, which is also kind of scary.
Right, it is. I mean, but it does boil down to the fact that you have to be able to protect your home. I mean, somebody breaks in your house, call 911, but by the time the cops get there, whoever broke into your house is either gone with whatever they want to steal or has left you for dead. I mean, you've got to be able to protect your own, protect your family, protect your house.
Absolutely.
All of you out there that actually have children, I'm sure you agree with me that if somebody broke into your house, the first thing you want to do is make sure your kids are protected. So the fact of just owning a 22 long rifle is a good idea to keep that in your house just in case.
Absolutely.
Because you never know.
I have multiple firearms ready to go, and that's the whole thing is I have even asked the police officer themselves, it is not illegal unless you have a child, it is not illegal to keep a loaded firearm in your home. The only thing that is illegal about it is to keep a loaded firearm, or any firearm for that matter, within the reach of a child or easy access of a child, whether it's loaded or not. So if you have children under the age of 18, then I don't recommend it. But I have firearms that are within easy access for myself that are ready to go, that I lock up when I'm not home. But when I'm home, they're out ready to go just in case. And the reason is because I am technically the police around here. Not that I have some kind of grandiose delusion that I think I'm law enforcement. The simple fact is that there's me and two other, technically three other families that live within a 3 mile or 4 mile radius of just my home. And those and if something happens, none of those, for instance, I live so far away from all of my neighbors that if I fire a shotgun out the window at 2 o'clock in the morning, nobody's even going to hear it, let alone call the police. So if somebody comes to my house with a firearm, it's not like in the city where people are going to say, "Oh, I heard a gunshot," and call the police. I'm gonna have to rely on myself to defend myself with a firearm, and then call the police and say, "Yep, come and get him. This idiot tried to hurt me and my family."
I spoke to. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was pretty much finished what I was saying.
I spoke to the Adams County sheriff here, and I spoke to him about that exact same thing. And I told him, I own weapons and everything, and if somebody were to break into my house, what can I do to save my family without going to jail? He said if they break in, break a window, break a door, and they're in your home, I can use deadly force.
See, now in New York, I'm not exactly sure that a lot of police officers, which I don't blame them, police officers don't like to give out that type of information here in New York because it's pretty hit or miss. But I had a police officer tell me.
I'm friends with the county sheriff. I've known him for a few years now, and we used to talk almost on a daily basis back when I belonged to the Illinois Sons of Liberty, and I kind of became good friends with him, so I think that's the only reason he gave me that information. Because he even told me that if something like that were to happen, and I did end up shooting somebody and killed them, to call him first.
I was told by a police officer that you better make sure that they've caused you massive bodily harm, at least here in New York. He said for them to call you have to have a knife slice on your arm or something like that before you're really able to use deadly force. But I also keep rubber. I have a shotgun within arm's reach in my living room because where I sleep is close to the living room. So when I go to bed, it's next to the bed. But when I'm sitting in the living room, it's right there next to me with rubber slugs in it. So if I ever have to use, especially, I also have in mind, for instance, bears and everything else. If there's a black bear maybe harassing my livestock or something like that, I don't want to kill the animal for no reason if it's not doing anything bad. So you plug the animal in the butt with a rubber slug, and the animal gets scared and runs away and probably thinks twice about coming back to that area. We're down to the last 30. I'm sorry, brother. Excuse me, brother. Hold on one second. We're down to the last 30 seconds on this one, so we're going to have to come back after a quick break. So I'm going to finish off with a little bit of music real quick, and then we'll come back after this, all right?
It starts with one thing. I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how